Hello, everyone, and welcome to Work Ready, the A.R.T, the art of conquering fear. Work Ready is a program that's designed to help those affected by COVID in LA County job seekers either find a job or to improve your current work situation, either get a raise or get the resources to help you plan a more sustainable career path. The library is helping you do that in three ways. The first is we're lending out laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots out of 20 library locations. All you have to do is go to our website, lacountylibrary.org, click the Work Ready link, and fill out a pre-registration form. Select the libraries you want. We will assign you a computer, and you just have to go and pick it up, and you can have that computer for 6 weeks. So you can have a laptop and a Wi-Fi hotspot for 6 weeks. The second aspect of Work Ready is this, live events and also pre-recorded videos on our YouTube channel. We're having events every week of the 6-week sessions. And the last but not least way that we're helping people get work ready is by buying the latest and greatest career-related materials available either at our libraries or as ebooks through the library website. We're getting books on test prep, interviewing, resumes, cover letters, anything that you can think of with regards to work. And so, with that, I would like to introduce you to our wonderful speaker for today. Christy Demetrakis is a seasoned business professional with 25 plus years of experience in a variety of fields, including sales and management across Fortune 500 companies. In her current capacity as North America Sales Capability Director for Procter & Gamble, Christy designs and delivers industry award-winning sales colleges to train the North American selling organization. She's also actively involved in recruiting top talent and mentoring. She holds a bachelor's degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and an MBA. She has been married to James for 25 years and lives in Kentucky. She has 2 children and a dog. And with that, I bring to our digital stage, Christy Demetrakis.
Hello, hello. Oleg, give me a thumbs up. You can hear me. I see that beautiful smile. Fantastic.
There you are.
Awesome, awesome. Well, hello, everybody. I am Christy Demetrakis, and Oleg has learned how to pronounce that just perfectly as if it was his last name. But I am so glad to be here with you all today. In 1997, I completed my master's degree. I was working for the first company I worked for right out of college. And I finished my master's degree and I decided it was time to make a change because people told me that in order to get the financial benefit of securing a master's degree, I would need to change companies. And so I did. And I started working for a beer company. And when I made that decision, people around me, people who knew me, were shocked. They were shocked because I didn't and I don't drink. And they could not understand my choice in choosing to work for a beer company. But I worked for them for 5 years, and it was, for the most part, a good experience. I had great promotions, great promotion opportunities. It was a great financial move. And so it was a good thing. It was a good ride for a moment. But then things really started to change. And the more I advanced, the more the expectation was for me to drink and to be in environments and hang out in bars and just be in places that was really out of character for me. Wasn't to say it wasn't for some people, but for me, it was just a stretch in a direction that I didn't particularly want to go. And to put the icing on the cake, I guess at some point, all of the stars collided. And they say the stars aligned. In this case, the stars collided. And at that point, 4 or 5-year-old son came up to me one day and he said, "Mommy, what's beer?" And again, for the person who didn't drink and doesn't drink, that was the straw, I guess, that broke the camel's back. And I knew it was time for me to make a change. I was having a moral dilemma. And it's about that same time as the company also realized we probably needed to make a change, because I was having some moral compass issues, and they wanted me to relocate, and I didn't really want to relocate because, again, I'm now a little iffy about this company that I've been working for 5 years. And so we decided that we would mutually part ways. So you might say, well, that's a good thing. You mutually decided to part ways. And it was a good thing. And I had 3 months of severance. But with that 3 months of severance, I had no job lined up. But with that no job lined up, what I still had was 2 very small kids, daycare bills, house payments, car payments, you name it. All those things don't go away just because the job goes away. And so I knew that I was in a place that I had never been before. So as I think about this quote probably has never been more real in my life than it was at that particular time. One is never afraid of the unknown. One is afraid of the known coming to an end. I was in a very bad space, because what I didn't mention is that I was also the primary breadwinner in my family. So goes my salary, so goes all the other stuff. So what did that do? As I think about the unknown, because that was the issue. What I knew was true. I knew I no longer had a job and that I had 3 months to find another one. Okay, that's what I knew to be true. And I knew I did not have a job. And so when you get to this place of the unknown causes that person who is typically very confident when all the things are going right. And that unknown causes you to get to a place of stagnation and indecision. And lack of confidence causes a lot of things to happen. It causes you to go from this place of, yes, I'm on top of the world, to, what exactly am I doing and what am I going to do? And so when your confidence gets low, you lose faith in the company, depending on if you have a job, if you don't have a job. But you start to lose faith in the company that you work for or that you used to work for. You lose confidence in your team. So we're keeping this all corporate and career. You lose confidence in your team when there's the unknown. We don't know what is going to happen because we don't really know who to rely on and whether we can rely on them. You lose confidence in your network or your support systems. If I think about the pandemic, what we've all experienced over the last year and a half, it was hard to probably go to the places that you usually went to for comfort and support, because guess what? We're all going through the same thing. So you want me to help you, I need you to help me, right? So you start to lose confidence in that network and those support systems that you historically had. It also causes you to lose confidence in your resources. What are those resources? It might be financial resources, but it might also be the resources that you personally possess. We are a resource to ourselves. And when we lose our confidence, when that unknown kicks in, we stop and we forget what we already have, what we have in our own hands to be able to help ourselves in situations. We forget about what abilities and gifts we had. So the same gifts, talents, and abilities that you had when you were on top of the world, when you were delivering at your finest, when you're delivering business results like no other, those same skills, gifts, and abilities, they are still there. They don't go away just because, like in my case, I lost my job. Those abilities were still there, but we lose confidence in the resources and ourselves. And so the unknown causes fear. Now, what kind of fear does it cause? You name it. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of change, fear of rejection. The list goes on and on and on. And so when you see these signs, you know it is time to do something different. That's what we should be doing, is something different when we get to that place. So before I talk to you about what we should do, let me introduce myself. Oleg did a great job of introducing me to you, and I appreciate that. I'll just give you some highlights. I have worked for a number of companies over the course of my career. I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill, go Tar Heels. And then I started my career working for Ralston Purina Pet Food Company. I was with Ralston Purina for 5 years. That's who I was working for when I got the master's degree. And then I left there and actually went to work for Fort James Corporation and got to Coors 18 months later. But I started to work for Fort James Corporation, and Fort James was the maker of Brawny paper towels, quilted northern bathroom tissue. I left Fort James and went to work for Coors Brewing Company. And I stayed with Coors for about 5 years, went to work for the Gillette Company. I was with the Gillette Company for about 5 years until we were acquired by Procter & Gamble. And I have been with Procter & Gamble for the last 13 years, which is a testament really to the quality of the company that P&G is. And for those of you who keep up with the industry, what you may be looking at on this screen, if you haven't, I'll bring it to your attention, is all of the companies that I have worked for have been bought by somebody else, with the exception of Procter & Gamble. I am prayerful that we are big enough that that is not the case. But I have been in sales 99.5% of my career. And as Oleg said, my current role is in sales capability, where I get to design curriculums to enhance the abilities of our selling organization, which is work that I love. Work that I also get the opportunity to do at P&G as I mentor a number of people, but I also lead a recruiting team, college recruiting team. And so I do a lot of recruiting on campuses, as well as do a lot of interviewing. So some of those things we're going to talk about today as we get a little bit further along in the presentation, but that's additional work that I love doing, which is recruitment and interviewing. My family, Oleg mentioned, my husband, James, is an assistant principal at a middle school. Have my 2 babies. They're big, but I call them my babies. Parents, you know this, you'll always do that. My daughter, Michaela, is going into her 2nd year of medical school. And my son, Colin, is going into his senior year at the University of Louisville. So they're both at the University of Louisville. My son is actually doing an internship, a sales internship with Procter & Gamble this summer. So we're excited about that. He looks to be following in his mama's footsteps. And it's ironically my daughter. I started college pre-med. So how funny is that? But I'll let her finish it. That's not the career for me. I grew up in North Carolina, which is where most of my family still is. That picture there that you see, my parents there. And then I have 1 dog now. I keep the picture here for my 2 dogs. We lost our oldest, Sophie, in March. She was 15 and a half. So I haven't had the heart to take the picture down yet. But the little one on the right is Sam. And Sam is our Cavachon. He is 3 years old. I am the author of 2 books. My first book, Faith to Conquer Fear, Inspiration to Achieve Your Dreams. It's a compilation of quotes, anecdotes, biblical references, all to inspire people to walk in their God-given purpose. And then my second book, which is also my Amazon bestseller, is Faith to Conquer Fear, The Journey. Both of those books are available on Amazon. But that is me in a nutshell. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up the chat, although give me just a second, because I do want to kind of see a little bit of what you all are commenting, if you have any comments. I do a pretty good job of looking in both places, so if there's something you want to add or ask as we go, as Oleg said earlier, please feel free to enter it in the chat. And if I miss it, he'll let me know that I missed it. All right, so that's me in a nutshell. I started my company, The Empowered Speaker, in 2007, and it is a public speaking presentation skills training company. And my goal is to help people to become more confident and dynamic speakers. And so that's what I spend my time doing with corporations as well as individuals. All right, so we started off talking about the unknown, and we started talking about fear and how the unknown can cause fear of any kind. And there's a bazillion types of fear. All right. So when I ask people, though, and this is a question I ask people a lot, when I ask people, do you have fear? Most people will say, yep, absolutely, absolutely. What is that, a new fear? Yep, that one's mine too. Most people have no problem acknowledging that they have fear. And then every now and then, I will run into the random person who says, nope, Christy, I don't have any fear. I am fearless. And I usually look at that person and go, oh. But then I start to ask some questions. Because did you know that fear shows up in your behaviors? So think about it as like a cold or the flu. You don't realize you have the flu until you see the outward manifestation of symptoms: the runny nose, the cough, the sneezing, the fever. Fear is the same way. You don't really realize in many cases that you have fear until you start to look at your behaviors, because those behaviors are indicative of fear. So here's what I want you to do. This is our first interaction. I know you can't talk, but you can type. I want you to play a little game with me. So first, let me say this. If you're willing to play my little game, if you trust me enough to play the game, I want you to just type in the chat, I'm in, I'm in. Let me hear you. If you're ready and you want to, yes. Hi, Cindy. Yes, I'm in. Anybody besides Cindy? Awesome. Evelyn, Monica, yes. I hope. All right. So I got some players. I have some players. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to read a series of statements. And if these statements resonate with you, meaning they resemble you, all I want you to do is type in the chat, yes, that's me. It could just be yes, why, whatever. But if it resonates with you, I just want you to put yes in the chat. If it doesn't, no harm, no foul. You don't have to put anything in there. All right? Fantastic. Okay, so here's the first statement. I procrastinate completing the tasks that will make the most difference. That sounds like you. Say yes. Okay, so we got some yeses, we got some nos. I resist ideas and suggestions. I resist ideas and suggestions. Next, I avoid the people and situations that hold me accountable. I avoid the people and situations that hold me accountable. I like that. I consider them all, but only listen to a few. I blame circumstances, lack of knowledge, other people, etc., for my lack of progress. See some yeses there. Never from hope. Oh, that's wrong. Okay, nope. All right, let's keep going. I get angry, especially if someone asks about one of my tasks or goals. I am numb emotionally. I lack motivation and feel lazy about completing personal and professional chores. Cindy, you're cracking me up. I love it. Oh, this one's mine. I focus on low priority tasks rather than what will bring progression. Low priority task rather than what will bring progression. I love my to-do list, but I tend to not put the big things on it. I put the things on it that I can cross off very easily. Last one. I am easily distracted, and it takes great effort to return to or complete my tasks. So this is squirrel. Those of us who like to follow the shiny objects. Yeah, that gets most people easily distracted, easily distracted. So here's how to think about this. Purely unscientific, right? But if you type yes to call it 3 or more of these, then you likely have some type of fear. Now, does that mean it's a debilitating fear and you're not moving forward? No. Okay. But it also could be. It depends on what it is. So this is step 1 in what I call the art of conquering fear. And the A is for acknowledging. It's the first step to conquering your fear is acknowledging that you have fear. And that is the part that many people struggle with, which is why I always talk about it in the form of behaviors, because people can most readily identify their behaviors versus me just saying, do you have a fear of rejection? Do you have a fear of change? That feels a bit aggressive, but it also puts people a little bit on edge. But when you can show people based on some of their actions, how that might then translate to fear, it's more easily and readily seen. Okay? So the first step is acknowledging that you have fear. So what's step 2? What's step 2? So step 2 is understanding the root cause. Understanding the root cause of that fear and those behaviors. So let's start with understanding the root cause of the behaviors. What is the history of that behavior? So think about this. In order to solve an issue, you have to understand how that issue came to be, right? You have to understand why it's a problem in the first place. So if any of you do any gardening, I know that during the pandemic, people started to do a whole lot of things that they may not have done before because you had nothing but time. How many of you, tell me in the chat, did any of you start gardening? Anybody start planting a garden? No gardeners. Ah, bamboo plant. Okay, I already had some, planted 3 little pots. I love it. I love it. Well, I started gardening probably the last 3 or 4 years. So it wasn't new to me during the pandemic, but my husband built me this awesome raised plant bed. I should add a picture of that into my presentations moving forward because he did a great job. But anywho, so what I've discovered, the difference between this, call it raised bed planter, and just planting it in the ground is I've noticed there's no weeds in my raised bed planter. But if you do any gardening, you know that there are typically weeds. And we don't want weeds. Nobody wants weeds in their garden because number one, you got to pluck them out. And if you don't, it overtakes. It overtakes what it is that you're trying to grow, whether it's flowers, whether it's vegetables, whatever it is, weeds will overtake. And weeds suck the nutrients that your garden needs to actually grow. And so with weeds, when you pluck weeds, you know that if you don't get down to the root, what are you going to see tomorrow? New weeds. In order to get weeds to go away, you have to get down to the root and pull them out. And that is the same thing with understanding, with conquering fear and dealing with fear, is we have to get to the root cause of it. So when you think about what is the history of your behaviors, when did you start exhibiting those behaviors? So if you're a procrastinator, what was happening in your life at that time when you realized, or when you started to procrastinate? What was happening in your life when you realized that you were so easily distracted? Was there something going on, in your home life, something in your work life, had something major changed? What was it that triggered it? And this process, this whole process of understanding the root cause really is the part that takes the longest time. When you think about my 3-step process, this is the part that takes the longest time. And this is this particular question, what is the history of those behaviors, is a very important part of understanding where this fear comes from. And then the other question you have to ask yourself is, what triggers these behaviors? It's important to understand those triggers so that you can proactively address the fear before it starts. When I wrote my first book, one of the things that I heard, I'm a faith-based person, so I'll just say God. One of the things that God told me to do was to host a conference around that book, a Faith to Conquer Fear conference. And for 2 years, I did not. I was afraid to do it, but I could not tell you why. I could not tell you why. So I'm going back to my first question and I'm tied into the second. But I couldn't tell you why I was afraid, because I had been working in corporate America. I knew how to market. I knew how to sell. I knew how to get people. I knew how to organize meetings. I knew how to get speakers. I knew how to do everything that was required to run a conference. Yet I was afraid to do it, but I had no idea why. And I ended up talking on the phone to this lady that I met on LinkedIn from Australia. And she and I were talking, just getting to know each other over Skype, and just, figuring out what each other was doing, what we like to do, and all these kind of things, and what things we're working on. And I mentioned to her this desire to have host a conference. And she said, "Oh, why haven't you done it?" I said, "That's a great question. I don't have a good answer for you." She said, "Well, hypothetically, if you were to do this conference, what would it look like? What would it look like?" And so I proceeded in the next 3 minutes to tell her everything from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The speakers, everything, the food, everything. I laid it out for her. She said, "Great." This was in December. She said, "Great. I'm coming into the States in April. Let's do this. I'll be one of your speakers." What? So in that moment, I broke out into a full sweat, because now I'm being called to the carpet on something I said I wanted to do. I'm terrified to do. And now this person is going to put some pressure on me to get this thing done. And I don't understand why. Yes, Monica, panic mode. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So now I'm like, well, I have no good excuse. I've already laid it out. I know exactly what to do. There's just this fear that has been paralyzing me for 2 years. And so I went ahead. I started moving. I started planning it. I set the date based on when she was coming into town. And I ended up hosting this conference. However, between December and April, I'm praying and I'm thinking, okay, I need to understand why I am so concerned about doing this. I'm doing it, but I still need to understand the why. And so in February, I'm literally driving down the highway and a memory popped into my head of my 16th birthday party. I had turned 16, and my brother-in-law's sister, our birthdays were literally days apart. And so we decided to co-host a 16th birthday party. And on the night of the party, only one person that I invited showed up. One person. It's just bad. Just bad. It's just awful, right? That's a terrible thing. But I had repressed that. You can imagine why. I had repressed that. I had not thought about that for 30 years. And all of a sudden it came back to me and I went, fear of rejection. That's what it is. Because in my mind, anything that was very, very important to me was not going to be that important. That wasn't going to be important enough to other people for them to come. And that's why I didn't want to host that event. So the history of my behavior in that case was from when I was 16 years old. So sometimes you got to dig back. This is why it takes so long. That's why this process can take a long time. And this is the part where many people don't get past because we don't want to self-reflect and we don't want to dig. We don't want to do the work that it takes to help us get to that point. So what triggers those behaviors for me, that fear of rejection, that doesn't go away completely. Every time I want to do something big, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, is anybody going to come? Is anybody going to support it? So I'm triggered when I go to do something important that requires other people. How does that fear affect me? Well, I know how it used to affect me. I just didn't do it. I just avoided it completely. But now I do it anyway. So that's very important. So when you start to talk about what the root cause is, that this part becomes very, very important, and we have to dig. And sometimes that digging is painful and we don't know what's going to come up. And sometimes we do know. But in order for us to move forward, we have to go through these 3 steps. We have to truly understand the root cause. And the first 2 steps, these first 2 steps take a lot of determination. It takes a lot of energy. And they're very important, but there is a huge risk of getting stuck there. There's a huge risk of getting stuck there. So can you tell us how to dig into these 3 steps, step by step? It truly is a process. And it's a process I do walk through in my book, by the way. But you literally go through this process of asking yourself these questions. What was happening? And again, as the people that I have worked with over the years relative to this part of it completely, there's some things you can go through specifically in the book, but when they start to ask themselves the questions, because it starts with which of those behaviors you're exhibiting. Okay, it starts there. What are those behaviors that you are exhibiting? If you think off the top of your head, you already know what your fears are, that's a good head start. But when you really start to talk about the history of those behaviors, you have to start thinking about, okay, what was my childhood like? What has my life been like in corporate America? What was my life like in college? What are some things? Think about those formative years in your life when things impact you and make a real impact on how you behave. Usually that's where the history of those behaviors start to come up. And some things, and I forget who said it now, but some things are not even things that you have personally been a part of or that you personally experienced. A lot of fears that we have are put on us by other people. So if you think about it, like my sister is terrified of spiders. I'm terrified of snakes. Everybody should be terrified of snakes, in my opinion. But anyway, but I've always been afraid of snakes. But I know my dad is also afraid of snakes. My mom is afraid of snakes. So had I seen how they responded to snakes when I was very young, that probably also impacted the way I feel about snakes. But it's the same thing. It could be people who are afraid to go anywhere or people who are afraid to relocate. They're afraid of change. Why are you afraid of change? Because all your family has always been in the same area. I won't know anybody if I go anywhere else. My mom has always told me that everything I need is right here. All of those things affect. So you really got to start to look at those formative years or formative experiences to start to understand the history of why you act the way you act. It does start with that first step. And then once you get to the history and start to understand that, the rest of it will flow. What triggers it and how does that fear affect you? So that really is your step-by-step process. But, I would love to say first you're going to write down. A lot of it is in your head. A lot of it is in your head, and really just taking the time to self-reflect. But you have to want to learn, because even in the story that I just shared with you, and I'll keep moving, but even in the story that I shared with you, it took 2 months for me to get to that revelation because I was actively seeking the answer. That's the difference. For 2 years, I just knew I wasn't going to do it. I didn't want to do it. I was content with, I'm just not doing it. Even though it was in the back of my head, I knew I was supposed to do it. But I had just made up my mind I wasn't going to do it. And I knew there was something that was driving it, but I didn't care enough at the time to dig to understand what it was. So part of this is you have to want to know. Okay? All right. So I found this quote. This quote says, you can't build a reputation on what you're going to do. Can't build a reputation on what you're going to do. I love this. I just posted a video on YouTube, the 2 phrases that I hate. And one of those phrases is I'm fixing to, because I'm fixing to means you're not yet making progress. And so this quote I love because it leads right into the 3rd step in the art of conquering fear. And that 3rd step is taking action. It's taking action. So there are several ideas I offer in my book on how you can take action to conquer your fears. But I want to share a different perspective in taking action for you today. How do you take action to ensure that you are well prepared for opportunities when they actually arrive? Because it's too late to learn how to manage people when all of a sudden you are now tasked with managing 12 people and you've never even co-led a team, right? It's too late to realize you need public speaking training when someone says, hey, I need you to give us a 30-minute update at our next senior meeting, and you are terrified of public speaking. It's a little late at that point. So how do you pandemic-proof your career? That's what I want to talk about. And I'm going to pause here and ask if there are any additional questions before I transition into this next phase. because what we're going to talk about is really all about your skills and your abilities relative to taking action. So let me pause here. Oleg, I don't know if there's additional questions that I might have missed. Are there any questions on the art of conquering fear?
I didn't see any questions. I want to give people a little bit of time just in case something comes up
Okay.
and doesn't come right to people's fingers. By the way, is this a new slide? Take action? I don't remember this
I try to keep
thing.
it for you. I try to keep it clever for you.
Benson asks, why art but not science?
You know what? That's a great question. I've never been asked that question. Why art and not science? You know what? Because I think science is something that can be repeated over and over again, right? I mean, if you think about a science experiment, you know it works when you replicate the exact same mixtures in the lab every time. That's how you know it works. It's got to be replicatable. That's how we get vaccines. That's how we get all these types of things. But I think it is more of an art because there's no consistency. What the acknowledgement of those behaviors, the root causes, those and the taking action looks different by person. That's why I say it's an art. It's different by person. So I can't tell you the formula. I can tell you the overall, hey, you got to acknowledge, you got to understand the root cause, you have to take action. But I can't tell you specifically what to do and expect that it's going to also apply to Cindy and it's also going to apply to Monica. It really is an art, in my opinion.
And I've been wondering about this too. Hope asks, was your conference a big blowout success?
It was a raving success. It was. Thanks for asking. And I ended up doing it 3 years in a row. 3 years in a row. So that same fear I felt that first year, I felt it 2 more years, but I did it anyway. So thank you for asking. Yes. Yes. Woohoo. That's my favorite term. Woohoo.
All right. I don't have any other questions in the chat now, but go ahead and continue, and then hopefully people will have questions at the end.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so let's keep moving. Let's talk about taking action. That's where we're going to spend our time today. So some of you, now we're transitioning to career now. Some of you have worked your whole life to be as smart and as able as you are right now, but you're using your experience to justify your value. And that's a huge mistake. That's a huge mistake in a professional culture that often equates the word experience with the words has been. Now, I can say that because, I'll be 51 in another month, in a month and a half or so. And so I would say that I have tons of experience. I have lots of experience. And if I were looking for another job, I would need to reframe that, right? I need to reframe that because experience used to be what counted most. That's what people cared about. Companies cared about. Tell me about what experience you have. But employers now expect, unless you're right out of college, but employers now expect that you have experience. That's a given. That's kind of the price of admission. Companies care less about experience and more about your abilities and how you are growing your abilities to drive the company into the future. That's the key. Do you have the ability to grow and develop? And so I want to talk about what skills companies are looking for right now. So recently I found an article. It says, here's the top 10 skills in demand at top 10 US companies. And so this research was done by a company called MC. And they took the top 10 companies in the Fortune 500 and explored which skills they mentioned most frequently in their job postings. And so you can read here faster than I can tell you. But some of the companies on this list, Walmart, Amazon, ExxonMobil, Apple, CVS, Berkshire Hathaway, United Health Group, McKesson, AT&T, and AmerisourceBergen. And so what you can see from this slide is that communication appears in every single one of the top 10 companies' top 10 lists. Now, what does that tell us? Yeah, communications is admittedly a broad category, but communication is key and it's still relevant for the smooth operations of a company. So while you might have data technical, technical skills and all those types of things, those are important as well, especially depending on the scope of work. But at the end of the day, you still need to have the ability to effectively communicate what it is that you just created, what it is that you're working on. So there is really no one job where you can just sit in a cubicle all by yourself and never share your information, whether you're just having a conversation or whether you had to interview to get the job in the first place. So communication is very, very important. And communication includes everything from internal and external communication strategies to giving and receiving feedback. Yep, that's still communication, to listening, to public speaking, to interviewing, and more. So communication is this very broad topic. It's a topic that I absolutely love based on the company that I have. And so management came in at a close second. And then you also see sales, which is my career, as well as presentations. So I'm going to focus on communication today. And that's what I want to spend some education system is not doing a good job here. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, Vincent. So let's talk about communication. And here's what I want to start with. So first, any communication. Here's some things that are important. The art of brevity. What do I mean by the art of brevity? Keep it brief. Keep it brief. This is something I mentioned to you. My son is working for P&G this summer. And my sweet baby boy, he loves to tell you something the same way over and over and over again. I'm like, baby, I am smart. I know you might forget every now and then, but I am a smart woman. I really did understand it the first time you said it. I don't need to hear the 12 versions of the same story. So the art of brevity is key. Every response should not be a full dissertation. That is the quickest way to get me to, zone out, all of that. I need you to be brief. So now every time he comes in my office to tell me something, because he's working from home, he decided to come home this summer versus his apartment to do the internship. But every time he comes into my office, he's like, Mama, I'm like, give me the short version. Give me the short version. And he has to think about it. But to his credit, he is learning. So if I teach him nothing else this summer, if I can teach him to communicate succinctly, woo, child, that'll be worth the price of admission. But the brevity is key. Brevity is key. What I always tell, and my husband is the same way, so I know where he got it from. But what I always tell my husband is give me the high level first, and then let me ask you for additional details. And so that's a great way to think about it from an art of brevity. Then there's the art of storytelling. Storytelling is so, so, so important. And it's a skill. There's some people you've probably met that just tell great stories. You're like, oh my gosh, that's a great story. And you could just listen to them all day. It doesn't matter what they talk about. They have a great story behind it, or they position it in such a way as to tell a great story. And in sales, we have to be great storytellers. At Procter & Gamble, our selling format, the way that we teach our people to sell, really is in a storytelling format, because everybody loves a good story. Everybody loves a good story. And so when you can tell a story that engages people, but that ultimately also makes the point, people are going to be engaged. And that is considered great communication. And then there's the art of listening. So everything I've been talking about is talking, right? But we have to be listening. There's a saying that says God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Yeah, we should always be listening, not to respond, but listening to understand. And I, one of the things I always tell people is I have no problem just sitting and listening. I love to be entertained. That's how I call it, right? Really, I'm just listening. But I always say I love to be entertained. I could just sit and listen to people just talk. I don't have to say anything. I'm perfectly okay with just nodding and going, because you learn so much more when you're not talking. And so that's so, so, so important communication as you think about, again, different ways, the different modes of communication, whether it's feedback. Feedback, you want to listen and you want to be listened to. So that becomes important. Internal, external communication, whether you're in sales or any other type of business, listening is very important, because that's how you discover what is most important to people and then you tailor your message accordingly. Okay. So that's communication, but let's shift gears. Let's talk about public speaking, because that's another very core skill. It's a soft skill. So I think somebody said soft skill, went by a little bit faster, that I didn't get to see it. But if we think about the soft skills that are really, really important, a lot of those skills that were listed on that sheet were soft skills. Communication is absolutely a soft skill. Public speaking is a soft skill. And as technology continues to advance and we get more and more reliant on our phones and doing everything on typing and apps, and where we don't really have that verbal communication as often, public speaking skills becomes even more important because less and less people are doing it well. And so I always say I have great job security because many people are not good at public speaking. Most people are not good at public speaking. And you can tie that to the fact that 3 out of every 4 people have a fear of public speaking. What that tells you, they're afraid of it and they're not working on it. So if you can become that person who improves and enhances your public speaking skills, and you can communicate in a way that is effective for the people who are listening, that will set you above. That'll put you right above the game. And so in my speakers training camp program, I teach people the 3 things that it takes to become a confident and dynamic speaker: steak, sizzle, and style. But here's the things you should think about relative to public speaking. I just said it, 3 out of 4 people. Fear of public speaking is the highest rated fear above death. That doesn't mean we don't need it though. So we have to embrace public speaking. So if you know that you are that person who either has a fear of public speaking, or you're just like, I'd rather not, I need you to embrace it. So whether you hire a coach like me, or whether you join your local Toastmasters, embracing public speaking is key, because that is going to give you a competitive edge in the long run. Practice. Practice is so important. And practice is important because, a lot of people think that just because they're comfortable talking, and, I have no problem talking to people and presenting information in a way that takes people on a journey takes practice. It takes foundational knowledge, but it also takes practice. And I always tell my clients, I ask them, how many times do you think you should practice for a presentation? And they go, once, twice, 3 times, 6 times. You should practice at least 6 times for a presentation, because that gives you the opportunity to practice different elements of your presentation. And while you're doing it, the part that people usually have a fear about relative to public speaking is that they don't really know what they're going to say. Organization. And so when you practice and you get your organization down, that removes a lot of the other fears and a lot of the vocal garbage and all the different things that fall into public speaking training. So practice is key. Know your value. There's a quote by, and I'm going to read it, by ex-boxer Bernard Hopkins that says, know your value. If you don't know your value, someone else will assign it to you, and it will be much less than your worth. That's powerful. That's powerful. And so when you are an effective public speaker, you become more valuable. At P&G, I was tapped to lead our North America Sales Growth Mindset Initiative with our president. Big opportunity, huge opportunity. And here's what's interesting. I'm asked a lot to come and train teams on growth mindset, though that's not my job per se. I create the strategy and all that good stuff. But here's what's interesting is when I'm asked to do that, whenever they introduce me, the different teams introduce me, they introduce me as the growth mindset expert. Now, am I a growth mindset expert? Nope. But because of the way I present the information, and because I present it in such a powerful way and in a way that demonstrates my knowledge of the topic, they call me an expert. Same thing. That's how I am adding value. So they think I'm a lot more valuable than I am because of how I present the information. And then the last thing I'll say here is you need to invest in formal training. Invest in formal training. If you are not a great speaker, there's no reason to continue to not be a great speaker. Okay, so invest, let that be personal development for you. Let's talk about interviewing. So I call this the APS process, APS process. So what's the first step? As you think about interviews, think about interviewing. I told you I do a lot of interviewing. I literally had a phone interview with someone earlier today for a role at Procter & Gamble. But when you think about the interviewing process, that's another form of communication, public speaking, how you show up, and what we hear, your ability to listen and give us information in the way that we want to hear it. But the first step in preparation for a great interview is to assess. So this is, I'm not even yet talking about once you get into the interview. I'm talking about before you get to the interview. Get clear on your background and your experiences. Now, I know you do some of this when you write your resume, but I'm talking about what are the stories and the examples behind the deliverables on your resume? Because when the resume is sent to that company, they're going to read it. I scanned this person's resume in about 10 seconds. I was like, okay, yep, got it. With the expectation that she would pull out for me the things that she deemed really, really important from that resume during our interview process. So that means instead of just focusing on those bullet points that are there, what is the story behind those bullet points? What's the story behind those bullet points? Because you want to be able to highlight your abilities. For example, you may not say on your resume that you are a great team leader, because you might not have the title team leader, right? But you might lead teams very well. You may manage teams very well. So you want to already be thinking about how are you going to bring to life the fact that you have this great experience managing teams through this resume process. That's the assessment process that happens ahead of time. Then it's about reviewing that resume and having someone else review it. I always read things backwards because that's how you find the typos and the grammatical errors. Because if you read it, your brain will automatically fill in missing words. It'll fill in because it knows what you meant to say, but that's not what's going to show up. So once you review that resume, are you including the roles and the relevant experiences that are applicable for that particular job? So you may have more than one version of a resume. Is it up to date? Do you have any grammatical or typos? And consider having a professional resume writer review it and or write it for you if that is not your strength. The other part of this assess process is get really clear on the type of work you want to do and if that role meets your requirements. What's important to you? Interestingly, I had a recruiter contact me about a week ago for doing a very big version of the job I currently have now. Now, does that sound enticing? Yeah, it's work that I love to do. What wasn't enticing? It was for a spirits company. Now, what did I tell you earlier? I don't drink, nor do I drink. I didn't drink, I don't drink. And that for me, that is a moral compass. That's an opportunity area or an area that I don't want to be engaged in. So while the role may have looked great, the environment was not the one I wanted. So I didn't engage, right? So you got to make sure that what you want to do and the company that you want to, does it mesh? Does it mesh? Okay. Then we get to preparation. Talk about preparation. And again, if you guys have any questions, throw them in the chat. Preparation is all, again, this is all before the interview. Do the research on the company you're applying for. I know this does not sound like rocket science, but you would be amazed how many people do not take a minute to just Google the company, to look at their annual reports, to check out what's been happening in the news before they come. You can find out a whole lot about a company without having to ask that particular person that you're interviewing with the thing that you should know, right? And so also think about, how do you prepare for those interview questions? There's a bazillion questions that you could possibly be asked, but there's two types that are consistent on every company: behavioral interview questions and situational. Behavioral is we want to know examples of what you have done in the past based on this particular scenario. Situational, we want to know what you would do. And a great way to think about the format of your questions or your responses is the bar format. Some people call it the star format. Some people call it the car format. But the B stands for the background. So give the background or the context. Tell what actions you specifically took, not we, we're not hiring we, what actions you specifically took, and what results you delivered based on the answer to that question. So interviewing is a skill, and it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of practice. And what I used to do that still works now, years ago, I told you all how old I am, but years ago when I was doing lots of interviewing in college, I literally had a legal pad. And I know people probably don't even buy legal pads anymore, but I had a legal pad, and I just went through and I said, okay, here's all the different types of behavioral questions that I might get. Something around teamwork, something around, working with others, something around leadership. You can Google it, typical behavioral interview questions. And I would write down 2 very different responses to every question. 2 very different responses, because what you don't want to have is you've gotten this one answer, you've rehearsed it real well, and then you get in the interview and they go, yeah, do you have a different example? And you go, oh, right? So that's not what you want to happen. So think about those questions in advance. Whatever mode you operate in, type your responses out, and then practice those responses. Okay? So that's now, and I'm sorry, that was practice. And then the last part is sealing the deal. That's your S. Seal the deal. Remember, I'm in sales, so we're always closing. We're always closing. Always prepare a few questions to ask at the end. There's nothing worse than someone saying, I don't have any questions. Really? Not one? You can't think of a single question to ask? Because what that does is that shows me as an interviewer that you're not really interested. You should always have a question, whether it's something about the company that you couldn't find during the research, culture, quality and inclusion practices, what makes you stay at the company. Those are the questions that sometimes you can't find online, but always have a question. Is there anything I can answer for you that I didn't cover in the questions that would show you that I'm a great fit for this role? That is a money question. I'm going to say it one more time. Is there anything I can answer for you that I didn't cover in the questions that you asked that would show you I'm a great fit for this role? When people ask me that, I give them the keys to the kingdom. I literally will go back from the first question all the way to the end, and I look back at the responses because I capture their responses as we go, and I go, you know what, actually on this one, can you give me a little bit more information here? Or you didn't really mention your ability to analyze data. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? All these types of things, okay? So
Hey, Christy.
Yes,
Christy,
yes.
can you repeat that? Because that was a great question, and we want to hear it again.
Yes, absolutely. The question is there anything I can answer for you that I didn't cover in the questions you asked that would show you I'm a great fit for this role? So while that's doing, the interviewee says that. So if I'm the one interviewing, I would ask Christy, who is interviewing you. So Benson, you're interviewing for a job with me. You would ask me that question at the end, because that's your opportunity to be able to highlight anything that they might still be thinking is kind of questionable. So this gives them an opportunity to tell you, or gives you an opportunity to highlight any things that they might still be wondering. I wonder if he has that ability or not. I wonder if, right? So you open the door to say, is there anything else I can tell you that would help you make a decision in my favor? Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to assume yes for the moment. He says, that doesn't make sense to him. Okay, let me see a different way I can say this. When your interview is over, so assume, Benson, that I have given you, I've asked you 7 questions. I've asked you 5 behavioral questions. I've asked you 2 situational questions on teamwork, on leadership, on innovation. Exactly. all those types of things. But at the end of it, I, as the interviewer, might still have some questions. But I've asked you my standard questions, and I'm like, yeah, okay, good enough, whatever, I'll keep going. But when you ask that question there, before we end, and I say, okay, now, Benson, you have any questions for me? You can ask me about the culture. You might ask me about our equality and inclusion efforts. You might ask me about, again, why I stay with the company. What do I love? What's the pros and cons? All these different things. But then what you want to make sure is that that interviewer does not have any questions about why you might not be the best person for the role. That's what you want to do. You want to make sure that they don't have any lingering questions in their mind. And when they ask that question, I go back through, I'm like, okay, what am I missing? Am I confident that I know what their data analytics abilities are? Am I confident that they've had enough experience calling on another retailer? Am I confident? And I ask those questions. That gives me, as the interviewer, an opportunity to probe more, but more importantly, it gives you an opportunity to sell me again on you. Okay? Yes. Who says they bomb interviews? Let me scroll up. Who says that? Adrian. Okay. Yeah, so you mark all the boxes with that question. So that's a very, very important one. Very important one. And so the last part of sealing the deal is asking for the job. If you want the job, ask for it. And you're kind of asking for it when you ask that question we just talked about, but you have to ask for the job. And it's not, it could be, I want this job for me, but you probably say, hey, after you ask that question, is there anything else I can answer for you that I didn't cover in the questions you asked, and give them an opportunity? And you answer the questions. If there's any follow-ups, and say, well, I'm very, very interested in the role. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. What are next steps? That's how you ask for the job, right? That's how you ask for the job. Okay? So let me look. Any other questions there that I might have missed, Oleg?
There are some questions, but I think we can cover them at the end.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. All right. So how many of you have played this game, Candy Crush? Anybody play Candy Crush besides me every night? Okay, so this game is this highly addictive app game. And I downloaded it on my phone. My husband, whatever. Confession, that's right. Hope confession is good for the soul. But the goal of this game varies by level, but the idea is to match 3, 4, or 5 of the same colors to create more powerful color bombs. And these color bombs help you to achieve the target. So if you think about this target, if you look at that image in the middle, up in the upper right-hand corner, that's your target. And that target changes based on the level that you're at. And it seems simple. It does. It seems very simple. It's just a color matching game. It's just a color matching game. But then it's not, right? Then it's not, because as you get further and further, more strategy is required. And it just gets harder. And so I'm okay with harder. I'm okay with strategy, but here's what I'm not okay with. So when you don't succeed, this is the screen that you get. I just want you to read that for just a moment. Level failed. You did not reach the goal. Level failed. You did not reach the goal. And so that's heartbreaking. You did not reach the goal. So, most games you play, they're like, oh, would you like to try again? No, they just crush you. Level failed. You did not reach the goal. And so I put this here, and I want to talk about Candy Crush Saga because this is a great example of what do you do when you fail, especially with something as simple as an app and a game that you play. Because you have the option every time. I'm on level 479 or something at this point. But every time I play this game and I don't get past the level, I see this particular screen. It's the same screen every time. I see this particular screen and I have a choice to make. I have a choice of whether I'm going to stop playing it completely or whether I'm going to try. Because And this is important because I want to bring this back full circle, because I and other people, you guys have been doing this for about 4 weeks. I think you have a couple more weeks, but we can share a lot of tips and tools and tricks with you on career and a lot of other topics that you are probably being exposed to. But if your mindset is not right, you won't execute. So all the communications things I talked about, the public speaking, the interview tips that I talked about, and anything else you all have discussed up to this point, if your mindset is not right, which is why I started with the art of conquering fear, because that's your mindset, you will not execute. So how do you move past failures? How do you move past the fear? And it's collaborating with your mind. Collaborating with your mind. And here's why that's important, because your mind does what it thinks is in your best interest. So your mind is always going to take the easiest way. So whatever it believes is in your best interest, that's what it's going to do. Your mind is also hardwired towards pleasure versus pain. Nobody is going to choose pain. Not a sane person. Okay. Now, I say that, which is also why, if you think about those of us who go to the gym and those of us who don't want to go to the gym, many people don't go to the gym because we want the outcome, right? We want the great body, we want the, the biceps, we want the, great abs, all those types of things. But in order to get to that place, that requires tearing of muscles and rebuilding of muscles. And I have not known yet an opportunity where tearing a muscle was pleasurable, was pleasurable. So our mind is hardwired towards pleasure versus pain. So in order to get to something different, we have to switch how our mind thinks, how our mind operates. Our minds prefer the familiar. It prefers the familiar. That's why people often get stuck in a rut. When I told you understanding the root cause, that's a place that many people get stuck. It's an opportunity to get stuck, because that requires you to think differently, do differently, explore differently. And your mind doesn't want to do that. And one of the most important ones on here is your reality looks like the pictures in your head and the words you say to yourself. I had an opportunity to do a session with the LA librarians a few weeks ago. And we talked about the power of what you speak, the power of the words that you say. And so your reality looks like what you have fabricated in your mind. So if you're thinking negative thoughts and you're saying negative things and you're envisioning negative things or outcomes, that is what's going to manifest itself, because your mind works constantly, subconsciously, to bring things to life. It works to bring things to life, which is why we have to condition our mind in the way that's going to help us achieve success, because mindset equals success. Mindset equals success. Okay? All right. So there's another quote I want to end with. You all see that I love quotes. Where I am today is my starting point. Who I am today is my starting point. My failures and successes of the past, my fears and hopes of the future are all shadows. Today is my reality, and I'll use it to create my world. So that's where I'm going to leave you. And I'm going to leave this on the screen as a way to connect with me. I hope that you all will connect with me. You can find my website there. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook.
And with that, once again, Christy, thank you so much. This is the third time I'm seeing you speak, and every time I get something different and new. And you know it's good when you can see it multiple times and not be just like. So much appreciated. Have a good afternoon,
Thank you,
and
you all
we'll
too.
see everybody next week.